Hello and welcome to the video. This is the ZOHD Dart 250 that I looked at a couple of weeks ago. I finally got the Maiden in. It has taken me a lot longer than I expected because this little thing here has fought me, and occasionally this happens. Now, I don't think this is a fundamental problem with the model. I think I was just expecting a little too much from it. And now I've got the Maiden and know how it flies, I can talk about it. But what I also want to do is talk about some of the little wrinkles and things that I found with this. So let me just give you a brief history, without going into loads of detail, about the kind of issues that I was having. So first of all, I set the model up with a 2S lithium ion battery in it and the 2S prop at the back, with it as it was in the last video. I added the FPV equipment with a little micro runcam camera at the front, the GEP RC Nano VTX, and also the little antenna from SpeedyBee here underneath as well. And that was ready for 249 grams. So Ross and I, one of my flying buddies, we tried to launch it. First time with all the control surfaces in line with the wing as I would normally set it up. No stabilizer, and it just flew straight to the ground. Luckily, nothing was broken. So I then, on the radio, adjusted the trims to give myself a little bit of up trim for the elevators at the back and a little bit of a trim to counter that roll, which looked like torque roll from the prop. And Ross threw it again, great throw, but again into the ground it went. Now that very possibly could have been a stall because of the relatively steep angle. It seemed to just kind of lose lift and over it went. But in terms of the initial bit of flying, it looked good. However, at that point the nose had snapped off. I'd also snapped the brace that holds the wing into position, so that was the end of flying for that day. So I thought, okay, let's put a Kopilot in this. It might be that this is a model that's built for Kopilot. I have flight controllers or the Kopilot system in my other models from ZOHD, both the Dart 250G, which is very nice, and the beautiful Drift as well. So we popped in one of those, and I also changed it over to a 3S LiPo battery, something like this, which is about the same weight as the 2S lithium ion battery, and you know, it's now about 267, 230, something like that, 267, 270. Took it to the field, and luckily we got it flying. And once it was flying, we found some stuff out. Now this as a model has the same nasty tip store characteristics as its bigger brothers. Now lots of people really love the Talon kind of model. It does have a huge amount of space inside for all your electronics, but I don't like them because they don't float for toffee. It is like a flying brick, and every single Talon that I've had has been like that. Unfortunately, scaling down a model like this also means that, unfortunately, they've also kept all of those same characteristics. So if you're already a Talon pilot and you don't mind that kind of nasty problem that you can sometimes get, then you know what, you'll be fine. Let me talk a little bit about how I've set it up to successfully Maiden it, what the tricks were, because it wasn't just putting a Kopilot in. I've done a couple of other things. First of all is I've actually give it a little bit of up tilt, about 2 millimeters of elevator to help it in the launch. I've also then, the elevator, the ailerons are trimmed so that there is a little bit of counter rotation. Because in the Maiden, as soon as I got the thing flying, it became very clear that the gains were too high, because you've seen it was doing that. So I just picked it into manual, trimmed it and flew it. And once it was in the air, it's actually not a bad little model. It's a relatively breezy day, and she didn't really care about that. She was just poodling around. In the 5-minute flight that I had that we're looking at here, the battery came down with 80% left in it. So that could give me a 20-minute flight time, even on a 1300 3S LiPo, which is easily enough for most pilots. Of course, if you were using the lithium ion pack on 2S, then you're going to get in 2-3 times that kind of flying time. Now, as I mentioned, mine took quite a few knocks. The nose was broke off, and I also had to replace the spar that sits inside here that this single bolt goes into. That appears to be a little bit of a weak point. I've put the design of the replacement that I made on Thingiverse, so if you want to have a plastic version, that I think is probably not a terrible idea. That little piece is the only thing holding the whole wing onto the model, and with it being balsa, it could have a crack and you don't spot it, and potentially then it could let go if you're doing a particularly aggressive move. This isn't built like a tank. The walls are relatively thin, so you know it's not going to be a great model for crashing into the ground on a regular basis. But this is the first 4-channel model of this type that kind of can squeak under the 250 gram limit. And now with it trimmed, as I've just shown you, it's actually flying fine in manual mode, and I actually quite like it. Of course, the only thing with it being a Talon is you have to keep the motor running. It will stall on you if you let the airspeed drop too low. Now, if they'd have given this to me before they released it, I would have probably given them a few areas of feedback. First of all, I wouldn't have scaled the wings down in exactly the same proportion of the rest of the body. I potentially would have made the wings a little bit bigger, reduced the wing loading, hopefully helped a little bit with that nasty tip stall characteristic that these little guys can have. I would have added a place for the GPS for the Kopilot. I would personally recommend, if you get one of these, a Kopilot is a handy thing to add, but there isn't a natural place. There is on some of the other models, like with the Drift, and even with the Dart 250G, there are places you can put it. I just put it here in the end and it seems to work fine, but it would be nice to have some kind of little recess maybe for that GPS, seeing as a Kopilot is actually a really good idea. The prop clearance for the 2S prop, it isn't quite enough for the little tail at the back, so be aware of that. If you come down land on concrete, you potentially could strike the end. However, if you're using the 3S prop like I on here, you don't have that issue. I would have also liked a slightly bigger battery eliminator circuit on the ESC, maybe have a 3 amp 5 volt one. I had to add an extra little piece of technology, one of the Maytech battery eliminator circuits, to power my little FPV kit setup. It would have been nice to be able to do that from the 5 volt supply that was in the plane. And interestingly, there wasn't a JST flying lead out of the ESC to provide an auxiliary power supply for your FPV gear, and that's a bit of a shame as well. I know it's really designed for the VC400, but I'm not a fan of that camera for anything but the brightest, nicest flying conditions. So in summary, there it is, it flies. I love the Drift, I love the Dart, but this one fought me. Maybe it would have been a lot less tricky if I'd have put the Kopilot in from day one. I might have got to the Maiden a little bit faster. Models that are designed to get under the 250 gram weight, all of them that I've had in here are an exercise in compromise. This one is exactly the same. It has survived a lot of that abuse pretty well, and with a little dab of hot glue it's all gone back together, but I don't think it should be that difficult to get in the air first time, and I know I'm not the only one that has struggled. The last tip is when you launch, don't use 100% throttle, use about 70%. Using the 100% throttle was, I think, part of my issue in the very early Maidens. I think that torque roll was part of the issue that I was having that was pushing it over. I can't see any warp in the wings. I don't think it was an issue with the plane. I think it was just the way that I was trying to launch it. I was trying to launch it like I do every other plane, and the lesson that I've got from this one is you can't do that with the Talon. You have to set it up with those little biases on the control surfaces. Ideally, have something like a Kopilot installed, get to about 70% throttle, give it a throw, and you'll probably be fine. So this I wouldn't recommend for a new pilot. I would probably go for one of the other models in the range. I think this is a little bit too fragile for a trainer, and it's definitely not built to take lots of abuse that a new pilot will give it. So unless you're really after the 250 gram version of this, my recommendation would be, if you want a Talon, go with a Nano Talon. The Nano Talon that ZOHD do, although it's a little bit bigger, a little bit heavier, is a far more capable model and will take some of those knocks. However, again, if you're learning, I wouldn't particularly recommend a Talon anyway because of that nasty tip stall that it can do. But I hope that now we have 3 models in the 250 gram range from ZOHD. What they do is they work on next on giving us the replacement for this thing here. This is the ZOHD Dart. Sadly, appears to be discontinued. It's gone from the price list. This is my version 1. That has been with me for years and years and years. I've probably got nearly 100 flight hours on this. Brain FPV flight controller, iNav, a little Runcam hybrid at the front. This is just epic. 635mm. ZOHD, if you're watching, great job on the 250 grams. Let's have a more modern dart. Thank you for spending your time today watching that video. You can find me in all the usual places on social media, and if you're trying to learn about a subject, then check out the playlist. All of my videos are organised into easy to follow playlists that if you're trying to learn a topic will take you from the basics right the way through to some pretty advanced stuff.